Hi everyone. So I guess we're all here convinced that generative AI has taken the world by storm. Certainly promising to transform the way companies operate in an incredible amount of ways. So as it's often the case, we have to pick our battles. We have to decide how we allocate the very limited resources that we have. So this panel is about this. Like which are the use cases that seems to be a good place to start? Or rather, because maybe the answer will differ for everyone, how do you prioritize them, right? So to add to Yannick's introduction, I'm very glad to be joined on stage by two pretty high caliber executives who've been grappling with this particular question for quite some time already. So on your left, I think, we have Andrea Lachapelle, so CDO of Edenred, the payment service provider some of you may use on a daily basis. But what you may not know is that they are, I think, operating in 45 countries, so probably bigger than you thought. And I think you and your team have churned out more than 50 data use cases to date, right?
Yes, we have a bunch of use cases and a lot of them in production already and scaled.
Yeah.
But yeah, and generative AI comes a little bit on the top of all that, so we had to handle this on the...
Right, yeah, no 50 Gen AI, but still quite impressive. Some really cornerstones of key business processes. We will talk about this in a bit. And next to me, we have Ariette Ries, so CIO of one of, I guess, the most successful neobank in the UK. I think you and your team of, how's that, 500 plus tech and data and digital experts have basically enabled the bank to capture, how many is that, 4 million clients in a few years' time, so quite a track record. So to kick this off, the first question I would address to both of you is, I think in general, the general approach or the gold standard for prioritizing data use case or any business initiative in general is to try to estimate ROIs, right? We'll start off with the top ROI, as long as it's somewhat consistent with the company strategy, try to account for dependencies, but do you think this approach applies strictly to how you would prioritize Gen AI use cases? Maybe we can start with you, Andrea.
Definitely, well, it was a big debate in the company when we started. First of all, we tried to, let's say, structure a little bit the approach, and we said, what type of use cases regarding generative AI? And we split it in 3 categories. We say, okay, what is really new is individual productivity. So, of course, it's like I'm an employee and I will have a new tool like Copilot. And then the other 2 were already in place. So we said operational efficiency, what you say, I do better my pricing, cross-sell, that didn't change. And then we have a third one, I think, in Edenred it's very specific. We tried to have added value services, which is data-powered services, which is customer-facing. So we have AI, let's say artificial intelligence based that helps people to find the next gas station which has the lowest price, for example, in mobility. So we didn't change. So we added this third category because we know that with Copilot topics that comes, but we didn't change the approach. So usually what we prioritize, it's based on the strategic part of the company. So we say where is the area that we have the biggest impact in the company, and we did do the ROI analysis. So, and we did a push on that. We did, for example, in customer care, we sit, and not just we did the ROI, but we also say, okay, how I will measure afterwards. Because at the beginning, sometimes when you do a use case, you analyze an ROI, but people don't measure afterwards in production. So we sit with the customer care director, and we say, okay, if I'm doing this for, I don't know what internal process, we realized it was impossible to measure afterwards because he had to change all the contracts for the call centers. So in some cases, say, okay, this we split. So yes, in Edenred, we're very, let's say, value-driven because it's a double-digit growth every year, a lot of EBITDA. So definitely if you do a use case, the investment has to be reasonable in that. So yes, but in the same time, we do a lot of test and learn. Why? Because it's a new topic and we want to make sure internally as a team we do have the knowledge to address the make or buy. So the team, and what we've seen is based, if I compare it before, the POC MVP far, it's very, very short. So it allows you to do more proof of concept and test and learn. So that's definitely, I think we did use cases, it takes a couple of weeks and months. It took 2 days. So, well, in terms of investment, you can test and learn more than you did before. So this we continue, but I think we go for maybe 70%. You have to be sure it has an impact, but still 30 or 40%, you allow this test and learn in the company.
So, all right, is it the way you guys operate as well? And maybe can you throw in a couple of examples of the topics that you have decided to prioritize and why?
Sure. So definitely, I think the way that you've approached it in terms of thinking about what the impact could be and sort of segmenting it into, I think, the 3 examples that you outlined there, very similar approach we've taken. The other aspect we considered, though, is really where we thought Gen AI might bring something much more than what we already had in some of those spaces. And of course, actually, the Gen AI models that we have today, we know, are just so much better at dealing with large corpus of text or large unstructured data. And as Andrea mentioned there, with a much shorter time loop to actually be able to do something meaningful with it. So that's actually where we ended up focusing our effort for that reason. So specifically, in our case, we run a large operations center to support the 4 million customers. Every time a customer either calls us or types to us via the app, because we have a sort of chat interface, that's a lot of text going back or sort of contact going back with the customer. And actually using LLMs to be able to synthesize that information, summarize that information, shorten it into something that's much more easily usable either by the next agent or the next member of staff or perhaps another model. That we saw as a really big step forward versus the technology that we already had in-house at the time. So we focused our effort there, and therefore most of the benefits that we're getting today from Gen AI use cases are really around the operations, efficiency, and then quality gains that we get from the back of that.
Thanks. So something that you mentioned, Andrea, but my next question then is for Ariette. You mentioned POCs, and I think in most organizations that are quite mature this day when it comes to data, I mean, we feel there is a bit more of a disregard towards POC, and there is sort of a common wisdom that advises to consider industrialization from the get-go, to start by nothing less than an MVP, right? But Ariette, do you think there is a case for maybe POCs in the world of Gen AI?
Absolutely, and I think Andrea, brought it out very clearly. Actually, what we're seeing, and I think others in the industry are seeing, is that there is a much shorter time loop to actually getting the Gen AI use cases to something meaningful. And I think a lot of that is the fact that, in general, people aren't developing their own LLMs in-house. We're using actually quite a small number of well-known and well-tested LLMs, and then actually just fine-tuning them on our use case. So that's quite a different thing to us having to start from scratch, do all the data preparation, do all the data engineering to train a whole new model and go through very many statistical approaches. Actually, we're talking about sort of prompt engineering, which is something which a few years ago we wouldn't necessarily have really sort of considered the major part of an ML or AI use case. So we're definitely seeing there's a much shorter time frame, and therefore we all have a little more openness when it comes to actually giving something a go and allowing experimentation. I also think the other aspect that's really important when it comes to POCs is that this technology is so new. It's been around a few years, but we've still got so much more to learn. So actually allowing teams to experiment really brings out some of the creativity and allows us to actually benefit from the things that might be somewhat unexpected. And I know that that's something we've seen in the teams that we've allowed to test this technology. We've come across areas where perhaps we wouldn't have immediately thought we would use this tech, but actually through experimentation, we found that we can get some benefit.
Thanks. Andrea, what do you think about that? And maybe, did you have any successes with POCs and small-scale initiatives that later grew?
I think my side was a little bit like say, is it going to be like the other way, we had previously, is it going to be more impactful this time? And I was a little bit skeptical at the beginning, and we did a hackathon, I think, in December. And after that, I was really, really impressed. I will give you an example. When you have a list of leads or prospects, usually your sales team spends a lot of time on gathering information on the internet, preparing their pitch. It takes them 2 or 3 hours by prospect, which is a lot of time, you say. And in this case, you just get the company number, which is a unique. You give it to a LLM and you say, please get me all the information. And actually, you can structure in the same way as your CRM. And then you push it back directly, say, please give me this information, structure like this. And it takes, 1 or 2 minutes. And then gives you also a pitch. And that was not just it, because, well, you say, okay, this, okay, for you go from 2 or 3 hours to 1 minute, but actually the fact that you have your data in a data lake or data warehouse at the company level, you can say, because you gave them the structure that is similar to your CRM, you can say, can you see other clients which are similar to this one? And then you can all the information. So basically, before you have your pitch, you can see quite fast how much money this client can bring to you, what is the probability to sign with you. It was much more powerful, and we did it in 2 days. So it was the first day preparation, and the second day they did. I was quite surprised, because you imagine how long even web scraping and things like this takes a lot of time. And we had another example. Sometimes you have big countries which have a lot of money to invest in a referential master data management, and smaller ones who don't have the money to do that. And we use generative AI to clean the data, the database, to have a client information which is clean, which usually takes, everybody know master data management, how long it takes to invest. It's years of work. So we've seen this short time. I will not say there's a specific use case, but we're using it at all areas, and it accelerates the deployment and the use cases. So exactly what Harriet was saying, we are using it in use cases, but I let the team experiment as much as possible. I even put in my team's objectives. They have an objective, so they don't get the bonus at the end of the year. If they don't use it, if you're a data engineer, if you don't use the technology and you don't know it. So I said, you have to be on the top of whatever is going on the market, because I don't want you in 6 months for you to be completely irrelevant. So it's all the place. So I put it on data platform. They can do SQL query in natural language. So it's all the place today. But of course, at the company level, the CEO and the executive committee, we prioritize what are the key, and we follow up, I think, once a month with them what is going on.
Okay, so that's interesting. Both of you do have a fair amount of experiment, small scales, and then you pick some of them to grow into a full-scale product or project, I don't know. So I guess the way you select them, correct me if I'm wrong, is looping back to the title of our panel discussion, is trying to find the one that will maximize the impact. But, maybe how do you define the impact of a Gen AI, or do you measure the impact of a Gen AI use case?
Yeah, so as I talked about, the sort of first and pioneering Gen AI use case we started with was this summarization of calls and chats from customers, and to try and make that process smoother, more seamless, actually for our staff. So this was really about efficiency, an element of productivity. And as we rolled this out, we were actually a little bit nervous about this, because obviously we've all seen it, AI is going to take over the world, no one's going to have any jobs. That was a big sort of concern that we had, and we thought, how will our staff perceive us using this tech to do something that is actually a core component of the job that they have to do? And actually, what we were met with completely surprised us, because actually writing up a summary of a call with a customer wasn't something that our staff particularly enjoyed doing. They found it to be not particularly meaningful. And they actually found it quite stressful, because if you've been on a call with a customer for half an hour dealing with very many different topics, it can be quite difficult for an agent to remember every single thing that they need to write down. So there was definitely a sort of agent and staff satisfaction aspect, which we didn't consider in our ROI assessment, but actually we've seen after the fact. And then the other aspect that we've seen is actually a quality benefit, because whilst we think that our human agents, do a great job, we all know that humans are, we make mistakes. Sometimes we don't do things perfectly. And actually, what we found with the Gen AI model that we have in place, or the Gen AI approach, is that we can more carefully structure the response that we get from agents and ensure that it meets the standards that we expect before submitting it as the final product. So actually, there's been a quality benefit for us as well. So I think we learned that from our first experiment with Gen AI, and probably going forward, we would add those elements into an assessment that we would have as to whether we would get the benefit that we expect going forward.
All right, so yeah, so 3 aspects that I guess you can quantify: efficiency, quality, and satisfaction for both staff and clients. But do you feel, maybe Andrea, that working on Gen AI, or maybe some specific Gen AI topics, also may have an impact on your employer's brand, and maybe your ability to recruit, to retain tech talents? And what about non-tech talents?
Well, I think I will answer to that with two examples. I think 2 or 3 months ago, the chief product officer of one of our major regions calls me and gives me a chat and say, Andrea, what do I do? Can you give me a little bit more information how we're structured on data? What do we do exactly? And say, why do you need this? I say, well, I was in a job interview. So it was not on tech, it was on product side. And the person asked me what we're doing. Do we do things on data? It was an important thing for that person to say, are you using the latest technologies? Are you data-driven in this company? And that was one example. Hiring a head of data, a data director in Brazil, for that person was very important that she speaks to me and see what we're doing. Definitely, I will not say for data engineers or data scientists. And I did it not just to attract, for me it was a no-brainer. So when I do my pitch of one recruitment, I say we have a super modern data platform, we do demos, this is what we have. And I usually spend time even hiring a junior data scientist to explain on this. And I think we see it on the TV all day long, in the press. I think it's going to be hard for any company to attract talent if you are not, and sometimes when I speak to the executive committee, I say, if you don't believe in ROI, that's not an issue. But think that you might not be able to attract talent. And actually, our CEO, we had an internal data in AI days, and the last sentence he said, we are also going to do it because we need to attract talent. And we are conscious of the fact that if we don't do this, people will not come and work for us anymore. So when you are a tech company like ours, very techy, digital, every day on that, you realize we have 25% of people working on tech. So definitely, it's going to be hard to attract.
Yeah, and this is something we see too. I think that, actually, particularly for the data sort of segment of the people we're trying to attract, they really want to be on the forefront of this technology. And so they need to know that they're joining a company that is going to allow them to experiment, to learn, to be at the front of that transformation, actually, of the data and tech sort of environment. So I think we've definitely seen that this is something which potential staff ask about, our existing staff expect us to be on the front curve of, and actually we feel that we're protecting ourselves and our workforce by allowing them to experiment with these technologies.
Thanks a lot, both of you, for your insights. And so I guess that the main takeaway is that Gen AI, prioritizing Gen AI use cases is not just about ROI. It's a bit more nuanced. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.